Meredith Harding always loved Tuesdays. On that day, clients were usually more decisive and deals closed faster. This Tuesday was no exception. She sold a luxurious penthouse in the city center after only 2 showings. Parking her silver Lexus outside the house, she paused for a moment to admire the neatly trimmed hydrangea bushes. Clayton had planted them 5 years ago, on their first wedding anniversary. An unfamiliar red Mustang was parked in the driveway. Meredith frowned. She didn't remember Clayton mentioning any guests. Then again, he hadn't said much to her lately. Morning coffee, a perfunctory good morning, and rare dinners in complete silence. That's what their life had become over the past year. The front door was unlocked. The hallway was cluttered with boxes and suitcases, and voices could be heard coming from the kitchen. Women's voices. "Mom, maybe you should have at least warned us. Stop whining, Tammy. You have every right to be here now." Meredith froze in the kitchen doorway. At their family table, with her feet up on an antique chair, sat a young blonde woman in short shorts and a pink top. Next to her, sitting majestically, was a woman of about 60 with perfectly styled gray hair and a suit that clearly cost more than the average office worker's monthly salary. "Oh," said the young woman, "here comes Mrs. Harding." "Former Mrs. Harding," corrected the older lady. "Allow me to introduce myself. I am Eudora Rowling, and this is my daughter, Tammy. We will be living here now." Meredith blinked. Once, twice. The thought flashed through her mind that she must have fallen asleep at the wheel and was now having a strange dream. "Excuse me." "Don't pretend to be surprised." Eudora pursed her lips. "You couldn't have failed to notice that your marriage was falling apart. Clayton has been seeing my Tammy for a long time." Tammy seemed slightly embarrassed and swung her legs down from the chair. "Where's Clayton?" was all Meredith could ask. "At the hospital, of course. Where else would he be?" Eudora stood up and walked over to the coffee maker. "You know, this model isn't suitable for making proper espresso. Tammy and I brought ours." Meredith noticed that their coffee maker, a wedding gift from her parents, was already in a box by the door. At that moment, the front door opened and familiar footsteps could be heard. "Honey!" Tammy sang and fluttered into the hallway. Clayton entered the kitchen, holding Tammy's hand. His eyes met Meredith's for a second before he looked away. "Meredith, we need to talk." "I suppose we do," she said, her voice sounding surprisingly calm. "You see," Clayton began, but Eudora interrupted him. "No explanations necessary. The situation is perfectly clear. This house is big enough for all of us. Temporarily, of course, until Tammy and I find something more suitable." "Temporarily?" Meredith raised an eyebrow. "In my house. In Clayton's house," Eudora corrected her. "As far as I remember, it was paid for entirely with his money." It was true, the damn truth, which now hit Meredith like a punch in the gut. The house had indeed been bought with Clayton's money, earned from his surgical practice. She was just starting her career as a real estate agent at the time and couldn't contribute much. "Clayton," Meredith turned to her husband, "you let them move into our house." He shifted from foot to foot, avoiding her gaze. "It's temporary, Meredith. Eudora and Tammy are in a difficult situation. I couldn't refuse." "I couldn't say no." Those words echoed in Meredith's head. Something wasn't right here. Clayton didn't look like a man who had brought his mistress home. He looked like a man who had been backed into a corner. "Tammy, sweetie," Eudora cooed, "show Clayton how we rearrange the furniture in the living room. We need his opinion." When they were alone, Eudora turned to Meredith. "Don't do anything stupid, dear. You're a smart woman. You see how things are going. Just accept it with dignity." Meredith looked at her for a long time. In 20 years of working with people, she had learned to read them like open books. And now she was looking at more than just the domineering mother of her husband's mistress. There was something more to her. "You're right, Mrs. Rowling," she said slowly. "I am a smart woman." Eudora smiled smugly, taking these words as a surrender. She didn't notice the cold flash in Meredith's eyes. The first rule of a successful real estate agent is to know how to wait for the right moment, and Meredith was a damn good real estate agent. "I'll pack my things and move into the guest bedroom," she said. "I hope you don't mind?" "Oh, don't worry about it." Eudora waved her hand. "Tammy and I will take the master bedroom. You can stay in yours." As she climbed the stairs, Meredith heard Tammy laughing and talking to Clayton in the living room. Her husband responded in monosyllables, as if with great effort. Entering the bedroom, she closed the door and leaned against it. Meredith took out her phone and opened her notes. "Eudora Rowling," she typed. Something told her she had heard that name before. She would remember where. For now, she would keep watching. After all, she had had an excellent teacher, Mrs. Peterson, her first mentor in the real estate business. "Never let a client see that you're desperate to sell a house," she had said. "Be patient. Every house will find its buyer. You just have to present it right." Well, Meredith was going to sell these uninvited guests on the idea that they'd be better off leaving, and she knew it would be her most successful deal yet. Meredith spent her first night in her own home with uninvited guests sleepless. She lay staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the past day in her mind. Downstairs, the floorboards creaked occasionally. Apparently, Eudora or Tammy were awake. Clayton had not yet returned from the hospital, even though it was well past midnight. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, Meredith heard the front door slam. Quiet footsteps on the stairs. Clayton always walked carefully, as if afraid of waking his patients even at home. She heard Tammy whispering, then the sound of the guest bedroom door closing. In the morning, Meredith woke up earlier than usual. The house was unusually quiet. Going down to the kitchen, she found Clayton there, mechanically stirring his cold coffee. "Good morning," Meredith said, and he flinched as if he had been caught doing something shameful. "Good morning," he muttered without looking up. Meredith poured herself some coffee and sat down across from her husband. The silence lasted several minutes. "You know," she finally said, "after 15 years of marriage, I've learned to recognize when you're hiding something." Clayton grimaced as if he had a toothache. "It's hard to explain. I have a long day ahead of me." He finally looked up. His eyes showed a mixture of guilt and fear. "Remember when I told you about my first year at the Mayo Clinic?" Meredith nodded. That was before they met. "I told you there was a difficult situation with a patient, but it all worked out in the end." "Nothing works out in the end, Clayton." He smiled bitterly. "You're right. Then a patient came in, an elderly banker with an aortic aneurysm. It was a routine operation, one I'd done dozens of times during my residency. But something went wrong. Maybe I was too confident." Clayton fell silent, lost in his memories. "The patient died on the table?" "No. Worse. He survived but was left paralyzed. His family was preparing a lawsuit. That would have meant the end of my career, even if the court ruled in my favor. The reputation of a young surgeon is a fragile thing." And then Eudora Rowling showed up, Meredith guessed. She was the head of a charity fund at the hospital. Somehow she found out about the lawsuit and decided to intervene. Out of the goodness of her heart? Meredith's voice was sarcastic. "Eudora never does anything out of the goodness of her heart. She offered the patient's family compensation, a huge sum from the fund. In return, they had to drop the lawsuit and sign a non-disclosure agreement. And you agreed. What else could I do?" Clayton ran his hand over his face. "I was young, scared, and she seemed like my savior. But that wasn't the end of the story. No. A month later, she came to me and explained that the money had to be returned to the fund. Gradually, of course. Small amounts from each operation." Meredith froze. "You embezzled patients' money?" "No." Clayton stood up abruptly. "I just overcharged for some procedures. Just a little." The insurance companies paid. No one suffered. Except the healthcare system. I know. He sat down again. I know. But Eudora kept all the documents. One phone call and my career would have been ruined. And then Tammy came along. And you fell in love? God, no. He looked at Meredith desperately. She started working at the hospital as a nurse. Eudora arranged for her to work in my department. And then she started hinting that her daughter was lonely, unhappy. I tried to keep my distance, but she found a way to make you date Tammy. Clayton nodded. At first, it was just lunch together. Then she started showing up at charity events I attended. Eudora was always there, smiling and reminding me of our business relationship. And now they're living in our house. I'm sorry, Meredith. I should have told you sooner. You should have, she agreed. But you can't change the past. Just tell me one thing. Did you sleep with Tammy? No. His exclamation sounded so sincere that Meredith believed him. I can't. I love you. Footsteps sounded upstairs. Clayton jumped up like a frightened rabbit. I have to get to the hospital. He practically ran out of the kitchen. A minute later, the front door slammed. Meredith stared thoughtfully out the window at her husband hurriedly getting into his car. So, Eudora Rowling, the woman who built her empire on other people's mistakes and weaknesses. I wonder how many more like Clayton have fallen into her trap. Tammy floated into the kitchen in a silk robe. Oh, you're still up? Where's Clayton? At the hospital. An emergency call, Meredith lied. Always the hospital, Tammy pouted. Mom says he needs to spend more time with his family. Family. The word cut like a knife. Meredith looked closely at the girl. She seemed sincere in her dissatisfaction. Did she really believe that she and Clayton had something going on? Tammy, Meredith began cautiously, how long have you and Clayton been? Oh, almost a year, she perked up. Mom says he's so shy. He was too embarrassed to tell you, but now everything will be different. Mom says. That phrase sounded too familiar. Meredith began to realize that she wasn't dealing with a homewrecker, but another victim of Eudora's manipulation. Eudora herself entered the kitchen, impeccably dressed despite the early hour. Tammy, dear, aren't you dressed yet? We have a meeting with the designer today. We need to discuss updating the interior. Meredith finished her coffee in silence. A plan began to form in her head. Clayton was right. You can't change the past. But the future was still in their hands. A week of living with the Rowling family had turned Meredith's orderly life into a reality show. She deliberately started coming home earlier than usual, canceling several evening shows. Every day brought new discoveries. The first thing that caught her eye was Eudora's pathological need to control her daughter's every move. Tammy couldn't even order food without consulting her mother. Honey, you remember you're gluten intolerant, right? Eudora snatched the delivery menu from her daughter. And anyway, we're not ordering that Asian food. You might be allergic to it. But Mom, I've never had... That's exactly why you're still alive and healthy, thanks to my care. Meredith, pretending to be engrossed in reading documents, noted to herself how Tammy wilted and obediently put the menu aside. I wonder if this intolerance really existed. The answer came the next day when Meredith accidentally caught up with Tammy in a cafe near the hospital. She was eagerly devouring pasta and pizza, washing it down with beer. Noticing Meredith, Tammy turned pale. Please don't tell Mom. She'll be very upset. I won't, Meredith promised, noticing the panic in the girl's eyes. Eudora, as it turned out, had her own quirks. Every morning she spent at least an hour at her dressing table, applying makeup with surgical precision. Once, Meredith noticed her throwing away a whole box of expensive cosmetics in a fit of rage because of one expired cream. Everything must be in order, Eudora said sternly, noticing Meredith's gaze. Otherwise, life falls apart like a house of cards. There was something like fear in her voice. Meredith began to notice how nervous Eudora became when something disrupted her usual routine. Even a vase moved a couple of inches could ruin her mood for the whole day. But the most interesting thing was to observe their interaction with Clayton. Her husband, usually so confident in the operating room, turned into a nervous teenager in Eudora's presence. He tried to spend as much time as possible at the hospital, taking on extra shifts. "Clayton has completely forgotten about us," Tammy complained to her mother. "Maybe we should talk to the chief about his schedule." "Don't worry, dear. I've already made an appointment with Dr. Summers. He's an old friend of the family." Meredith noticed how Clayton turned pale and knocked over his coffee cup when he heard this. There were other details. For example, how Eudora always carried a small black notebook with her, in which she constantly wrote something. Or how Tammy talked secretly on the phone in the garden, looking around as if she were a spy in a cheap thriller. One evening, passing by the guest bedroom, Meredith heard a muffled conversation. "Mom, maybe we should find another place to live. I feel like we're inconveniencing you." "Nonsense. We're not going anywhere. You want to be with Clayton, don't you?" "Yes, but—" "No buts. Remember what happened last time you decided to live on your own? Remember that waiter in Portland?" "Mom, please. 2 weeks in a mental hospital, Tammy. 2 weeks. And who got you out of there?" Meredith cautiously moved away from the door. So, Portland. And a mental hospital. It was worth checking out. The next day, she noticed Tammy secretly taking some pills. The girl carefully crushed them and mixed them with yogurt when she thought no one was looking. And then there was the incident with the mail. Eudora was the first to pick up the mail every day and carefully looked through every letter, including those addressed to Tammy. Once, Meredith noticed her burning an envelope without even opening it. Clayton was becoming increasingly nervous. He started drinking, just a little, but for someone who had never touched alcohol before, it was a noticeable change. "You know," he said to Meredith one night when he bumped into her in the kitchen late at night, "sometimes I think I'm going crazy, that all of this is just a bad dream." "Why don't you tell Tammy the truth?" "She won't believe me. Eudora, she's good at convincing people. She makes them see reality the way she wants them to." There was bitter truth in his words. Meredith had seen how Eudora manipulated not only her daughter, but everyone around her. Even the neighbors who had been unhappy with the new tenants at first now greeted her like an old friend. But everyone has their fears and weaknesses, and Eudora Rowling was no exception. Meredith noticed how she tensed up when certain names or places were mentioned, how she avoided talking about her past, how carefully she made sure all her documents were in order. And then there was that strange phone call. Meredith accidentally overheard Eudora talking to someone on the phone. "No, that won't happen. I've got everything under control. Yes, the documents are safely hidden. Listen, Mr. Baker, we agreed." The name Baker made Eudora visibly nervous. She even skipped her usual evening beauty routine. Meredith methodically recorded all her observations in notes on her phone. The picture gradually came together. Eudora was like a spider weaving a complex web of other people's secrets and fears. But there had to be weak spots in that web, and Meredith was determined to find them. "You know," Eudora said one evening over dinner, "I've always admired people who can keep secrets. It's such a rare quality these days." Meredith smiled. "I completely agree. Everyone has their secrets, don't they?" Their eyes met, and for a moment Meredith thought she saw a flash of unease in Eudora's eyes. Well, maybe the woman was beginning to understand. She wasn't the only one who knew how to observe and draw conclusions. Working as a real estate agent had taught Meredith one important thing: information is everything. In 15 years of practice, she had built up an extensive network of contacts: lawyers, bankers, insurance agents, private investigators. All the people without whom complicated real estate deals would turn into endless bureaucratic red tape. Her first call was to Ray Donahue, a private investigator who helped her vet shady buyers. "Portland, you say?" Ray grunted into the phone. "Give me a couple of days. The psychiatric clinic is narrowing down the search." Next, she called Martha Andrews, her old friend from the insurance company. "Eudora Rowling?" Martha's voice sounded surprised. "Wait a minute. That name rings a bell. We had a case with a charity fund about 10 years ago. Something to do with embezzlement. Give me some time to dig through the archives." Meredith methodically gathered information as if putting together a puzzle. She started a separate notebook where she wrote down all the details, no matter how insignificant they seemed. Time was on her side. Eudora and Tammy, confident of their victory, were becoming less and less cautious. One morning, when everyone had left, Meredith carefully examined the belongings of the uninvited guests. In Tammy's suitcase, under a pile of laundry, she found a tattered diary. Several pages had been torn out, but the remaining ones told an interesting story. March 20th. "Jake says Mom is manipulating me. Maybe he's right, but she's always taking care of me, although sometimes I feel like I'm suffocating." March 25th. "Mom found Jake's letters. She said he wants to use me like that waiter in Portland. I don't remember what happened in Portland. Why can't I remember?" The last entry was dated a month earlier. "Mom says Clayton loves me. But why is he always so tense? Why does he avoid me? Mom says it's because of his wife, but I've seen the way he looks at Meredith. You don't look at people you don't love." Ray called 3 days later. "You won't believe what I found out. 5 years ago, there was a scandal in Portland involving the Hope Charity Fund. Eudora Rowling was its chairwoman. The fund provided assistance to psychiatric clinics. An interesting coincidence, don't you think?" "What happened to the fund?" "Officially, financial difficulties and closure. Unofficially, about $2 million disappeared. An investigation was launched, but it was quickly shut down. It was as if someone pulled the right strings." Meredith wrote this information down in her notebook. The picture was starting to become clearer. Martha called back the next day. "Remember that banker, Mr. Baker? He was the main sponsor of the Hope Fund. He now lives in a nursing home in Seattle. They say he had a nervous breakdown after the scandal with the fund." "Baker?" Meredith remembered Eudora's phone conversation. "Can you find out the address of that nursing home?" Meredith spent the next few days compiling a dossier. She drew up a detailed timeline. Portland, the Hope Foundation, the missing money, the mysterious story with the waiter, the psychiatric clinic. One evening, while looking through old newspapers, she came across a photograph. Eudora Rowling at a charity event, next to her a young man in a waiter's uniform. His face seemed familiar to Meredith. She enlarged the photo and gasped. The waiter looked remarkably like Clayton. "She has a certain type," Meredith muttered. "I wonder how many Claytons there were before him." A plan began to form in her mind. Eudora had built her empire on other people's secrets, but every empire has a foundation. And if that foundation could be shaken— Meredith made a list of people to contact: Mr. Baker, former employees of the foundation, doctors from the psychiatric clinic. Somewhere among them there had to be someone willing to talk. She knew she had to proceed with caution. Eudora was a dangerous enemy, capable of destroying people's lives with a single phone call. But Meredith had an advantage. No one took her seriously. To Eudora, she was just a nuisance to be ignored. To Tammy, she was an annoying reminder of Clayton's past. "You know," Tammy said one day, "Mom thinks you should move out. It'll be easier for everyone." Meredith smiled. "Maybe your mom's right, but you know what I've noticed over the years working in real estate? Sometimes the strongest house can collapse because of one small crack in the foundation." Tammy looked at her blankly, but Eudora, sitting across the room, looked up sharply. Their eyes met for a moment, and Meredith saw a flash of anxiety in them. The game was on, and Meredith was ready to make her first move. Meredith started small. She deliberately stayed late at work, knowing that this was the time when Eudora usually took her sleeping pills and was fast asleep. Tammy, on the other hand, often had trouble sleeping at night. Meredith had heard her wandering around the house after midnight more than once. Returning home around 11, she found Tammy in the kitchen. She was sitting with a cup of tea, mechanically stirring the long cold drink. "Can't sleep?" asked Meredith, making herself some coffee. Tammy flinched. "Oh, it's you. Yes, I can't sleep." "You know," Meredith said casually, "I was looking through some old photos of Clayton today. I found a few from his college days. Would you like to see them?" Tammy's eyes lit up. Of course she wanted to. Meredith noticed how eagerly the girl absorbed any information about Clayton's past. They settled down in the living room. Meredith took out the album she had prepared especially for this moment. "This is his graduation," she said, pointing to a photo of a young Clayton smiling at the camera. "And this is his first operation as a lead surgeon." "He's so handsome," Tammy whispered. "And happy." "Yes. He smiled a lot back then," Meredith said, turning the page. "Oh, that's an interesting story. Do you know what happened that day? In the photo, Clayton is standing next to an elderly man in an expensive suit." "Who is that?" "Mr. Baker. He was the hospital's main sponsor. By the way," Meredith pretended to remember, "your mom knows him, right? I heard her talking to someone on the phone." Tammy tensed up. I don't know. My mom rarely talks about her friends." "Really? I thought she liked talking about her charity work." "No," Tammy shook her head. "We usually avoid that subject, especially after Portland." "Portland?" Meredith feigned surprise. "Wasn't there some kind of scandal with the Hope Foundation, if I remember correctly?" Tammy paled. "I don't remember. I really don't. That was a difficult time for me." "Of course," Meredith said gently. "You know, I've noticed you've been taking some pills. I'm sorry, I don't mean to pry, but are you sure you need them?" "Mom says I do. After what happened with Jake." "Jake?" Tammy stood up abruptly. "I shouldn't talk about it. Mom won't be happy." "Tammy," Meredith looked her in the eyes, "you're 27 years old. You're a grown woman. Why does your mother still decide what you can and can't do? You don't understand." Tammy's voice became hysterical. "She cares about me. She always knows what's best for me. How did she find out about Clayton?" The question caught Tammy off guard. "What? How did your mother find out you're in love with Clayton? Did you tell her?" "No." Tammy frowned. "Actually, she's the one who told me he was perfect for me, that we'd make a wonderful couple." "And you believed her?" Meredith spoke softly, almost in a whisper. "Look at him, Tammy. He's miserable. You can see it for yourself." "No, no," Mom said. "But what do you feel? Without your mother's prompting, what do you feel?" Tammy was silent, her hands trembling. Suddenly there was a noise upstairs. Eudora had woken up. "I have to go," Tammy muttered, and almost ran out of the room. Meredith gathered the photos. The seed of doubt had been sown. Now she had to give it time to grow. The next morning she noticed Tammy furtively looking at her pills before taking them. At breakfast the girl dared to contradict her mother for the first time. "Mom, I think I'll choose what to wear today." Eudora froze with her coffee cup raised. "What's wrong with you, dear? You seem strange." "Nothing," Tammy replied quickly. "I just want to try it myself." Meredith, pretending to be absorbed in her newspaper, noticed Eudora's suspicious glance. Well, let her suspect. The important thing was that the process had begun. That evening, Tammy didn't come to the traditional family dinner for the first time, citing a headache, and Eudora drank a second glass of wine for the first time ever. A crack in their relationship began to appear. Now they had to act very carefully to prevent that crack from turning into a chasm. A message from Clayton arrived at 2 in the morning. "We need to talk. Urgent. Come to the hospital." Meredith found him in an empty conference room in the surgical ward. Clayton looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes and his hands trembling slightly. "Eudora met with the chief physician today," he said, without wasting time on greetings. She told him about the insurance company fraud." "And what did he say?" "That's the thing." Clayton ran his hand nervously through his hair. "He didn't seem surprised. In fact, he suggested I resign. Meredith, he knew. He knew all along. How long has Eudora known him? No idea. But that's not all. I had a difficult operation today. The patient is a well-known lawyer. There were complications during the operation. He's alive, but his condition is critical. And you know what's strange? 5 minutes before the operation, the nurse told me that the anesthesiologist was sick. He was replaced by another doctor I'd never seen before." Meredith froze. "Do you think—" "I don't know what to think, but the new anesthesiologist was clearly nervous, and the dosage of the drugs—" Clayton fell silent. "Anyway, if the patient doesn't survive, it'll be the end of my career." "Does Tammy know?" "No, but Eudora. She called me right after the operation. She said that accidents happen sometimes, and that I should be more accommodating." Footsteps could be heard in the hallway. They both fell silent until the sound faded away. "That's not all," Clayton continued quietly. "This morning I received a letter from a law firm. They represent the family of that patient with the aneurysm. After all these years, they've suddenly decided to reopen the case." "Eudora? Who else? She's methodically destroying everything I have, and I can't do anything about it because she has all the documents." "That damn notebook." "Notebook?" "Yes, she always carries it with her. Black, leather-bound. It contains all her secrets, names, dates, amounts." Meredith thought for a moment. This information could be useful, but there were more pressing issues at the moment. "What are you going to do with the patient?" "I'll stay with him around the clock if necessary. I can't let him—" He stopped when he heard his pager beep. "Damn, his blood pressure is dropping again. I have to go." The next 3 days were a nightmare. Clayton practically lived at the hospital, desperately fighting for the patient's life. Eudora became increasingly irritable, and Tammy more depressed. And then a journalist showed up, a young, ambitious reporter from the local newspaper. He had somehow found out about the problems during the operation and was now digging into the hospital. "This is a disaster," Clayton said when they met again at the hospital. "If an investigation starts, everything will come out. Old cases and new ones. I'll lose my license." "What if we go all in?" Meredith suggested. "Tell him everything yourself. About Eudora, about the blackmail." "No," he shook his head. "You don't know her like I do. She won't just destroy me. She'll go after everyone I care about. You—" At that moment, the alarm went off in the patient's room. Clayton rushed over, but it was too late. Cardiac arrest. Resuscitation was unsuccessful. That evening, a police officer arrived at their house. He asked a few questions about the operation and the anesthesiologist. Eudora watched with a barely perceptible smile. "What a tragedy," she said after the police officer left. "You know, Clayton, you should take some time off. Rest. Think about the future." "The future?" Tammy spoke for the first time. "Mom, what's going on?" "Nothing, dear. Just a few minor professional difficulties. By the way, did you take your medication?" Tammy left the room silently. Meredith noticed her hands clenching into fists. Meredith's plan was in jeopardy. If Clayton was arrested or lost his license, Eudora would have complete power over him. She had to act fast, much faster. That evening she called Ray. "Remember that anesthesiologist from Portland? Find him, whatever it takes. Now it's a race against time." And losing meant more than just defeat. It meant the destruction of everyone she cared about. Ray's call caught Meredith in her office. "I found something interesting," he said without preamble. "The Rollings weren't just moving from city to city. They were running. And everywhere, it was the same story." Meredith turned on her voice recorder. Over the years, she had gotten into the habit of recording important conversations. Let's start with Portland. Remember that waiter, Jake Taylor? He worked at the restaurant at the hotel where the Hope Foundation often held events. According to his colleagues, he started dating Tammy. It was serious. They were even planning to get married. And then, what happened? Suddenly, Jake was accused of stealing money from the hotel safe. The evidence was irrefutable: surveillance cameras, fingerprints. He was arrested. A week later, Tammy was admitted to a psychiatric clinic with a nervous breakdown. A month later, the charges against Jake were dropped. It turned out that the camera recordings had been tampered with. But by that time, the Rowlings had already left town. Meredith wrote down this information. And what happened before Portland? Seattle, similar story. A young resident doctor fell in love with Tammy. Suddenly, he started having problems at work, complaints from patients, accusations of negligence. In the end, he lost his license. Tammy ended up in a clinic again. When she got out, she and her mother had already moved. And every time a psychiatric clinic? Yes. And you know what's interesting? Eudora's charitable foundations were involved everywhere. She always started with charity. It opened doors for her to the city's high society. Meredith remembered Eudora's black notebook. How many more lives had this woman destroyed? At that moment, there was a knock on the door. Standing in the doorway was an elderly woman in a strict suit. "Excuse me," she said. "I was looking for Mr. Anderson's office, but—" She fell silent when she saw the photo of Eudora on Meredith's desk. "Do you know her?" Meredith asked quickly. "Unfortunately, yes. I'm Elizabeth Crane, the former chief accountant of the Hope Foundation." For the next hour, Elizabeth told her story. She explained how Eudora had manipulated documents and created fictitious accounts. She told them how she had once noticed discrepancies in the accounts. "I wanted to conduct an audit, but Eudora got there first. The next day, files containing child pornography were found on my computer. I was fired. I tried to prove my innocence, but—" "The notebook," Meredith remembered. "She writes everything down?" "Yes. It's her insurance. It has dirt on everyone she's ever dealt with. Names, dates, amounts. I saw that notebook once. It had entries on every person whose life she destroyed." When she returned home that evening, Meredith found an unusual scene. Tammy was sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by old photographs. "What's this?" Meredith asked. "I found them in the attic. It's me, in different cities, with different people, but I don't remember them. Why don't I remember them?" Her voice trembled. In one of the photos, a young man in a waiter's uniform was hugging a smiling Tammy. "Jake," Tammy whispered. "His name was Jake. Why did I forget him?" "Maybe it's because of the pills," Meredith suggested cautiously. At that moment, Eudora entered the room. When she saw the photos, she turned pale. "What are you doing?" Her voice sounded almost frightened. "Put that away immediately." "No, Mom, I want to know the truth. What happened in Portland and in Seattle? Why did we move all the time?" "You don't need to know. You were sick, "I wasn't sick." For the first time in her life, Tammy raised her voice at her mother. "It was you. You did something to those people. To Jake. To everyone." Eudora snatched the photos from her daughter's hands. "You weren't taking your medication. That's what's going on. You're becoming unstable. How did Jake become a thief? How did Dr. Harris become negligent? It's you, isn't it? This is all you're doing?" "Shut up." Eudora raised her hand to strike, but froze when she saw Clayton enter the room. "What's going on here?" he asked. "Nothing," Eudora replied quickly. trying to regain her composure. Tammy just needs to take her medicine. No, Tammy said firmly. No more medicine. I want to remember. I want to remember everything. She ran out of the room. Eudora rushed after her, but Clayton blocked her way. I think she needs to be alone. Meredith watched the scene, realizing that the plan was working. But she also knew that Eudora would now be more dangerous. A cornered predator is especially dangerous. No one in the house slept that night. The next morning, they discovered that Tammy had disappeared, leaving only a short note. I need to know the truth. Tammy returned 2 days later. She looked haggard with dark circles under her eyes, but there was a new determination in her gaze. Eudora, who had been torn between rage and panic all those days, literally rushed to her daughter when she saw her. Where have you been? I've been going crazy. I called the police, the hospitals. I went to Portland, Tammy replied quietly. I visited some old acquaintances. Eudora froze. What acquaintances? I found Jake. A dead silence hung in the room. Meredith, pretending to work on her laptop, froze, afraid to miss a word. That man is a criminal, Eudora hissed. He almost ruined your life. No, Mom, you ruined his life, and mine too. He told me everything. About the fake camera recordings, about how you staged the theft, about how he's lying. Eudora grabbed her daughter by the shoulders. You can't believe this scoundrel instead of your own mother. Is Dr. Harris lying too? What about the nurses at the clinic who told me what drugs you were giving me? Everyone's lying except you? Tammy broke free from her mother's grip. Her voice was shaking, but it was getting louder. You know what else I found out? About other cities. About other men whose lives you ruined. About charities where money mysteriously disappeared. That's your doing, isn't it? Finding people with skeletons in their closets, helping them, and then using it against them. I protected you, Eudora shouted. I always protected you. Those men wanted to use you, steal you from me. No, Mom, you used me as bait, as an excuse, as a justification for your schemes. At that moment, Clayton returned home. He froze in the doorway, assessing the situation. Oh, how nice that you're here, Eudora said. Tell Tammy how you care for your patients, especially your last one. Don't you dare touch him, Tammy said suddenly. I know what you did. You replaced the anesthesiologist, like always, using someone else's hand so you could keep your own clean. Eudora turned pale. You're delusional. You need to take your medication. No, Tammy recoiled. No more medicine. I'm not crazy. It's you. You're sick, Mom. She rushed toward the stairs, but Eudora grabbed her arm. You're not going anywhere. I'm your mother. I know what's best for you. Let me go. Tammy, listen. No. Tammy broke free with such force that Eudora flew against the wall. You're not my mother. You're a monster. She ran up the stairs. The door slammed. Something broke. Eudora slowly got up. See what you've done? Her voice was dripping with venom. Especially you, Meredith. Do you think I don't know who showed her those photos? Who pushed her into this madness? The only madness here is your manipulation, Meredith replied calmly. You'll regret this. You'll all regret it. Eudora went upstairs. A few minutes later, screams came from her room. What are you doing? Stop it right now. No, Mom. I'm throwing away these damn pills. Every single one of them. The sound of broken glass, a crash. The screams turned into shrieks. Clayton rushed upstairs. Meredith followed him. Eudora's room was in chaos. Broken medicine bottles, torn prescriptions. Tammy stood at the open window throwing pills into the garden. You ungrateful bitch, Eudora screamed. After everything I've done for you. You've done nothing for me. You ruined my life. You turned me into a mindless puppet. Tammy, calm down, Clayton tried to intervene. Don't tell her what to do. Eudora lunged at him. You'll be behind bars yourself soon. No, you won't, Tammy said suddenly, "because I'll tell them everything. About the anesthesiologist, about your threats, everything." Eudora froze. "You wouldn't dare." "I would. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Mom, and you know what? I finally feel healthy. For the first time in many years." At that moment, the doorbell rang. Everyone froze. Meredith looked out the window. A police car was parked outside the house. While the police questioned Tammy about what had happened at the hospital, Meredith sat in her office sorting through old documents to take home. 15 years ago, when she and Clayton had just bought it, she had insisted on keeping copies of all the papers. Now they might come in handy. "Linda," she called her old friend from the tax office, "remember you said you were looking for something interesting in the old park area?" "Yes, what is it?" "I think I have some information for you. Remember that scandal with the illegal redevelopment 10 years ago? When the whole neighborhood was almost demolished?" "Exactly. I was looking through some old documents." By evening, events began to unfold rapidly. Inspectors from the city planning department arrived at the house. They spent a long time measuring things, taking photographs and shaking their heads. "Mrs. Rowling," one of them said to Eudora, "did you know that this house is in a historic district?" "What does that have to do with anything?" she replied irritably. "It means that any changes to the layout must be approved by the commission. And we have information about unauthorized basement alterations." Eudora paled. "What alterations?" "The ones you initiated a week ago. We have a request in your name." "What? I didn't—" "And also," the inspector continued, "we have received complaints from neighbors about violations of residential use regulations. According to the documents, only one family should be living here. But in fact—" Eudora shot a furious glance at Meredith, but she calmly sipped her coffee, pretending that none of this concerned her. The next day, environmentalists showed up. It turned out that there was an old aquifer under the property, and any work in the basement could disrupt the ecological balance of the area. "We'll have to conduct a full investigation," said the bearded specialist. "It will take at least 2 months. And yes, the house must be vacated for the duration of the investigation." "What do you mean, vacated?" Eudora flared up. "We can't. There could be toxic fumes." The environmentalist shrugged. "We are responsible for the safety of the public." That evening, Eudora paced the living room like a caged tiger. "This is your doing, isn't it?" she snapped at Meredith. "You think I don't understand?" "I have no idea what you're talking about," she replied calmly. "I'm just a real estate agent. And by the way, speaking of real estate, do you know that using a residential house as an unregistered boarding house is a violation?" "What kind of boarding house?" "Come on," Meredith said, pulling out a folder of documents. "Here's an application to register a guest house in your name, and an online ad for rooms for rent. Very interesting business idea, though illegal in this area. I didn't do anything like that. Oh, and the tax office is interested in the source of funds for the purchase of furniture and repairs. You do remember that income from unregistered business activities must be declared, don't you?" Eudora slumped into a chair. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "On the contrary," smiled Meredith, "you have no idea. Do you know what real estate agents and surgeons have in common? We both work with documents. Only surgeons leave records in medical records, and we leave them in dozens of different agencies, and sometimes one little signature can set off a chain of inspections." The next day, the fire department arrived, then the health department. Each inspection found more violations. And then the journalist showed up. Someone, Meredith didn't know who, leaked information to the press that the historic building could be demolished due to illegal remodeling. "Mrs. Rowling, comment on the situation," they shouted, trying to interview Eudora as she left the house. That evening, representatives of the Historical Society rang the doorbell with posters reading, "Save the city's heritage." "You know, Meredith said thoughtfully, watching the circus. They say they're going to start giving tours here soon. A historic house, a redevelopment scandal, an environmental disaster. Tourists love stories like that. Eudora silently went upstairs. A few minutes later, the sound of breaking glass came from above. An oppressive silence fell over the house. Tammy and Eudora hardly spoke to each other, and when they did cross paths, their exchanges were more like military reports. "Are you going to work?" Eudora asked one morning when she saw her daughter in her medical uniform. "Yes," Tammy replied curtly. "In that state? Without your medication?" "I feel great. For the first time in a long time." "You don't understand." "No, you don't understand." Tammy turned sharply toward her mother. "Do you know what the psychiatrist I saw this week told me? That the drugs you've been feeding me weren't necessary at all. They just suppressed my will and turned me into an obedient puppet." Eudora turned pale. "You went to a psychiatrist? Without my knowledge?" "I'm an adult, Mom. I don't need your permission." At that moment, Clayton entered the kitchen. He looked exhausted. The investigation into the patient's death was still ongoing. "Coffee?" Tammy offered. Eudora snorted. "Now you're flirting with him in front of me? How sweet." "Mom, stop it. There's nothing between me and Clayton." "There never has been. It's all your manipulation." "Manipulation? I saw the way you looked at him, the way you flirted." "Because you made me do it," Tammy shouted. "You brainwashed me for years. Clayton is perfect for you. You'll make a wonderful couple. And I just wanted you to like me, to earn your approval." Clayton watched the scene in silence. Something in his gaze changed. "Tammy's right," he said suddenly. "This is all your game, Eudora. From the very beginning." "Shut up," Eudora hissed. "Or have you forgotten about what? The notebook?" Clayton smiled bitterly. "You know, I've been thinking a lot these past few days. About the patient, about that anesthesiologist, about all your coincidences." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really? What about the waiter in Portland? Or Dr. Harris in Seattle? How many more lives have you ruined with your schemes?" Eudora turned pale. "Tammy, go upstairs. Clayton and I need to talk." "No," Tammy said firmly. "I want to know the truth, the whole truth." "You know what I've realized?" Clayton continued. "You never act directly. You always use other people. A fake anesthesiologist, forged documents, fabricated charges. Proof," Eudora hissed. "You want proof, and you don't have any." "But I do," Tammy said suddenly. "I met with Jake. He has the original camera recordings, the ones you faked, and Dr. Harris. He kept the documents, too." Eudora lunged toward her daughter. You met with them?" "After everything they did." "They didn't do anything. It was all you." Tammy recoiled. "You know what else I found out? About other cities. About other men. It was your modus operandi. Find someone with a weakness, help them, and then use it against them. And I was the bait." A heavy silence hung in the air. Even Meredith, who had been silently watching the scene, held her breath. "I loved you," Tammy whispered. "I trusted you. And you turned my life into a nightmare." "Everything I did was for yourself," Tammy interrupted her. "Only for yourself. You controlled me, manipulated me, kept me on pills. I don't even remember half my life." She rushed to the stairs. Eudora tried to stop her, but Clayton blocked her way. "Enough. Everything has a limit." "You'll regret this," Eudora hissed. "You'll all regret it." She went up to her room. A few minutes later, there were sounds of drawers being pulled out and papers rustling. "She's up to something," Clayton said quietly. "I know," Meredith replied. "But now we have the advantage. She's scared, and scared people make mistakes." No one in the house slept that night. In the morning, they discovered that the safe in Eudora's study was open, and the black notebook was gone. The disappearance of the notebook was the last straw. Clayton, usually reserved and quiet, literally burst into Eudora's room without knocking. "Where is she?" His voice sounded unusually harsh. Eudora didn't even look up from her laptop. "What is, dear?" "The notebook. Your damn notebook." "Oh, you mean that." She slowly closed the laptop. "You see, I decided that such important documents should be kept in a safer place." "Where?" "My lawyer thinks—" "To hell with your lawyer." Clayton slammed his fist on the table. "I want the truth. Now." Eudora looked at him intently. "You know, you really do look like that waiter, the same impulsive." "What?" "Jake also liked to make loud statements, threaten people, and then—" She smiled. "Then it turned out he had a few problems with the law. A very unpleasant story." "You—" Clayton stopped short. "Did you deliberately look for men who looked like him?" "What are you talking about?" "Jake, Dr. Harris. We're all the same type, right? We all fit some ideal image you have. And we all have skeletons in our closets that you can manipulate." Eudora stood up. "You're rambling, dear. Maybe you should take a break? The last few events have clearly thrown you off balance." "No." He shook his head. "For the first time in a long time, I see everything crystal clear. You never planned for Tammy to be with me, did you? I was just a tool? Tammy needs protection, care, control." "Control?" Clayton laughed bitterly. "That's what this is all about. It's all about control. You can't let her be happy with someone else, because then you'll lose your power over her." Eudora clenched her fists. "You don't understand. Do you think it's easy raising a child on my own? Protecting her from all these predators? The only predator here is you. You ruined Jake's life, Dr. Harris's life. You tried to ruin mine. And all this time you kept your own daughter on tranquilizers so she couldn't fight back." "I was protecting her." "From what?" "From happiness. From a normal life." Meredith entered the room. She silently handed Clayton the phone. On the screen was a message from Ray. "Found an anesthesiologist. He's ready to talk." Clayton turned to Eudora. "You know what? That's enough. I'm going to the police." "You wouldn't dare." "I will, even if it ruins my career. Even if I go to jail for insurance fraud. I won't let you manipulate me anymore." "What about your wife?" Eudora smiled. "Are you sure you want to drag her into this?" "Don't bring Meredith into this." "Oh, but she's already involved. Who do you think arranged all these checks at home? Who was digging through old documents? I have proof of her involvement. Document forgery, abuse of office." "Mom, stop it." Tammy was standing in the doorway. She looked pale but determined. "I heard everything. And you know what? I'm going to the police too. I'll tell them everything. About the pills, about Jake, about Dr. Harris, about all your schemes." "You won't do that," Eudora whispered. "I'm your mother." "No. You're a monster who stole my life." Eudora rushed to her bag, but Clayton was faster. The notebook fell to the floor, opening to the page with his name on it. "That's it," he said quietly, picking up the notebook. "Game over." Eudora sank into a chair. For the first time ever, she looked truly frightened. "You don't understand," she whispered. "If this information becomes public, it's not just about you. It's about everyone. The foundations, the hospitals, your crimes," Clayton finished. "And you know what? Let everyone know. I'm tired of being afraid." He turned to Tammy. "Are you ready?" She nodded. "Ready. For the first time in my life, I'm really ready." They left the room, leaving Eudora alone. Meredith lingered in the doorway. "You know what's the scariest thing? You've become so used to manipulating others that you've forgotten one simple truth. Sometimes people just get tired of being afraid." Tammy disappeared the morning after she gave her statement to the police. She just packed a small bag and left, leaving a short note. "I need time. Don't look for me." Eudora reacted unexpectedly. Instead of her usual hysterics, she locked herself in her room and spent the whole day on the phone. Only in the evening did sounds begin to come from behind the door. She was methodically tearing something up and throwing it away. "We need to check what she's doing in there," Meredith said to Clayton. But when they went upstairs, the door was locked. "Eudora?" Clayton called. "Open up." "Get out," came a hollow, cracked voice. "All of you, get out." By nightfall, a strange smell began to spread through the house, like burning paper. When smoke began to seep out from under the door, Clayton broke the lock. Eudora was sitting on the floor surrounded by scattered papers. Some documents were burning in the fireplace. Torn photographs were scattered everywhere. "What are you doing?" Clayton asked. "Cleaning up," she said, looking at him with a crazy look in her eyes. "Can't you see?" An open laptop lay on the table. She was methodically deleting files. "And you know what's funny?" Eudora laughed hysterically. "I really wanted what was best, for Tammy, always just for her. By keeping her on pills." Meredith couldn't hold back. "You don't understand." Eudora jumped up. "The world is cruel. People use you, betray you, abandon you. I was just protecting her." "You weren't protecting her," Clayton said quietly. "You were controlling her, manipulating her, ruining people's lives." "Oh, as if you're so innocent, Dr. Harding," she said, mocking his title. "How many patients have suffered from your insurance schemes?" "Enough," Meredith cut her off. "There's a limit to everything." "A limit?" Eudora grabbed a folder. "Here's your limit. Documents about your real estate agency's illegal deals. You think I didn't do my homework?" She started pulling out papers but suddenly froze, staring at her phone. "What is it?" Clayton asked. "Tammy," Eudora whispered. "She's in Portland, with him, with Jake." "How do you know?" "She has geolocation enabled on her phone. I can always see where she is." Meredith and Clayton exchanged glances. Even now, Eudora was still watching her daughter. "I'm going there," Eudora said firmly, grabbing her bag. "No," Clayton said firmly. "Enough. Leave her alone." "You can't tell me what to do. She's my daughter. She's a grown woman who has a right to her own life." Eudora rushed for the door, but Clayton blocked her way. At that moment, his phone rang. "Hello? Yes, this is Dr. Harding." "What? When?" His face changed. "What happened?" Meredith asked. "That anesthesiologist—" "He was found dead in his apartment, suspected suicide." They both turned to Eudora. She stood by the window, smiling strangely. What a tragedy. His conscience must have gotten the better of him. "What did you do?" whispered Clayton. "Me? Nothing. Some people just can't bear the weight of their mistakes." She took her phone out of her bag. "Now excuse me, I have to catch a plane. My daughter needs me." "You're not going anywhere," said Clayton. "The police are on their way. They have new questions about the death of my patient." Eudora froze. "What?" The nurse remembered an interesting detail about your conversation with the anesthesiologist before the operation. Fear flashed in Eudora's eyes. She rushed to the door, pushing Clayton aside, and ran down the stairs. Downstairs, there was the sound of a door slamming and an engine starting. "Don't stop her," Meredith said suddenly. "Let her go." "Why?" "Because Tammy hasn't been in Portland for a long time. She's in a safe place. And Eudora, well, let her run. Now the police will have another reason to look for her." They stood at the window, watching Eudora's red Mustang disappear into the darkness. Somewhere in the distance, police sirens could already be heard. Eudora returned 3 days later. She looked haggard, her eyes dull. Tammy wasn't in Portland. Her geolocation had been faked. All this time, her phone had been on a bus traveling from Portland to Seattle. Entering the house, she froze in the hallway. Much had changed during her absence. Her things were gone from the living room. The photos were missing from the walls. The house seemed to have been cleansed of her presence. "Ah, you're back." Meredith calmly emerged from the kitchen with a cup of coffee. "The police are looking for you." "Where's my daughter?" "She's in a safe place, somewhere you won't find her." Eudora slowly sank into a chair. You planned all this, didn't you? From the very beginning?" "Not everything. Some things happened on their own. For example, your panic over the house search, or running away with fake geolocation. That was Tammy's idea." "My house." "Yours?" Meredith smiled. "You know what's interesting? I checked the documents. It turns out that illegal work was carried out here in 1997, and now the house could actually be demolished. Funny coincidence, isn't it?" Eudora turned pale. "You can't. You can't what? Use your own methods against you?" Meredith put down her cup. "You know, I learned a lot from you. For example, how important it is to have the right connections, or how useful it is to keep compromising documents." "My documents were burned." "Not all of them. Remember that accountant from the Hope Foundation, Elizabeth Crane? She has an excellent memory for numbers, and some very interesting copies of reports." At that moment, Clayton entered the house. He was carrying a stack of newspapers. "Here, read this," he said, throwing them in front of Eudora, especially the article on the front page. "Charity fund under suspicion. A story of large-scale fraud." Eudora grabbed the newspaper. Her hands were shaking. "No, no, this can't be." "It can," Clayton said calmly. "And this is just the beginning. The anesthesiologist left a letter with all the details of how you forced him to switch the drugs." "You ruined my life," Eudora whispered. "No," Meredith shook her head. "You ruined it yourself, with your intrigues, manipulations, and lies. We just let the truth come out." The doorbell rang. 2 policemen stood at the door. "Mrs. Rowling," one of them said, "you'll have to come with us. We have some questions about Dr. Parker's death." Eudora slowly stood up. "You'll regret this. You'll all regret it." "No," Meredith said quietly. "The only one here who has anything to regret is you. About not being able to maintain control. Over your daughter, over Clayton, over the situation. Do you know what the worst part of your story is? It's that you never understood. The harder you try to control people, the more likely they are to just walk away one day." The police officers led Eudora away. She didn't resist. It was as if all her life force had been drained from her. Journalists had already gathered outside the house, their cameras flashing at her haggard face. Meredith and Clayton stood at the window, watching the police car drive Eudora away. "Where do you think Tammy is now?" Clayton asked. "In a safe place. And you know what? For the first time in her life, she's truly free." The house seemed unusually quiet. A week had passed since Eudora's arrest, but she and Clayton were still getting used to the silence. No morning arguments in the kitchen, no tantrums or intrigues, just emptiness that needed to be filled with something. Clayton sat in the living room, mindlessly leafing through the files of his deceased patient. The investigation confirmed interference in the anesthesiologist's work, but there were still months of proceedings ahead. Meredith silently placed a cup of coffee in front of him. "We need to talk." "I know," he said, putting the papers aside. "I just don't know where to start." "How about the truth?" Meredith sat down opposite him. "In 15 years of marriage, this is the first time we've been in a position where we can truly be honest with each other." Clayton was silent for a long time, staring out the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky shades of pink and orange. "I chickened out," he finally said. "Back then, at the beginning of my career. I let Eudora blackmail me instead of confessing everything." "What about me?" Meredith asked quietly. "I wasn't perfect either. All that manipulation with the documents, the house searches. You were protecting us." "No." She shook her head. "I was protecting the idea of us, of what once was. But was it ever? A heavy silence hung in the room. Somewhere in the distance, an airplane flew by, its roar gradually fading into the evening air. You know what the scariest thing is? We've forgotten how to talk, Meredith continued. Really talk, not just exchange pleasantries at breakfast. I was afraid, Clayton admitted. Afraid that if I started talking, I'd have to tell you everything. About the insurance fraud, the blackmail. It was easier to keep quiet. And I was afraid to ask. I saw you pulling away, but I convinced myself it was temporary, that everything would work out on its own. Clayton stood up and walked over to the window. So what now? I don't know, Meredith replied honestly. We can try to start over, or admit that some things can't be fixed. Do you want to try? Meredith thought about it. They had been through a lot in those 15 years. There had been happy moments and there had been difficulties, but they had never been at such a crossroads before. You know what I've realized these past few weeks? She finally said. Sometimes you have to lose everything to realize what's really important. And what's important to you? Honesty. Being able to wake up in the morning and not have to play the role of the perfect wife. Being able to talk about what's bothering me without fear of how you'll react. Clayton nodded slowly. I got an offer today. From a clinic in Seattle. A new start, a different city. Do you want to leave? I want to ask you if you'll come with me. Meredith stood up and walked over to him. What if I say no? Then that will be an honest answer. Perhaps the most honest answer we've given each other in all our years together. They stood at the window watching the sunset. Somewhere in the city, Tammy was starting a new life, free from her mother's control. Eudora was awaiting trial, and they were standing on the threshold of something new and unknown. Let's not decide today, Meredith suggested. Let's just learn to talk to each other again. Really talk. Clayton took her hand. Okay, where do we start? How about coffee, the same kind you made on the first morning after our wedding? He smiled faintly. That was 15 years ago. You think I remember the recipe? No, but we can come up with a new one. They went to the kitchen. Ahead of them lay the night, and then a new day. And for the first time in a long time, they didn't know what it would bring. Maybe that was the beauty of it. The uncertainty, the possibility of choice, the chance to start over, or to admit that some stories had to end so that new ones could begin. The coffee maker hummed quietly, filling the kitchen with a familiar aroma. Outside, it was completely dark, and in the silence of the house, two people were learning to get to know each other again. No guarantees, no promises, just honesty.